the prospects, and we have the right people to speak to this particular issue, and then also have a very forward-moving conversation so as to ensure that as major stakeholders in government policy, we are not silent, even though this particular conversation has been going on for quite a while. For us here at Media General, our responsibility is also to create the right platforms to have such progressive conversations and also propose some solutions to these challenges that some government policies like the Free Senior High School is facing as we speak, because you're either beneficiaries or victims of government policy. And because as taxpayers, we are the ones who are funding the implementation and execution of these government policies, we also have a voice and we have to be heard. And so that's the exact objective why we put together this all-important conversation, the TV3 National Dialogue on the Free Senior High School program. Welcome. And we have our guests as well, and also our speakers seated, ready to speak to the issues and then also propose what the way forward should be. We are very, very inclusive in this conversation to make sure that all the voices are captured on the way forward. So welcome. And we have some audience also joining us from various interest groups, which I'm going to be introducing shortly, who have also made the time to be here with us. Thankfully, we have the speakers seated already, so we go straight to business. Professor Stephen Ade is a former rector of the Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration, GIMPA. He is an educationist as well, and he's contributed in many, many, many ways to the development of this country in various sectors as well. Professor Stephen Ade is with us. Prof, good morning. Welcome. Great. Also, Dr. Peter Pate Anti is the Executive Director of the Institute for Education Studies, IFEST, and one of the foremost education CSOs in the country as well as on the continent, who have been speaking to the teething problems that this education sector is faced with. Dr. Anti, good morning. Welcome. Also, we have Dr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie. He is an economist and a lecturer at the University of Ghana Economics Department, who has also been speaking to issues of government policy, and then also going to be helping us understand the financing issues, especially because that's one of the major issues that has come up with the Free Senior High School program, the sustainability of the current funding regime for the free SHS. Dr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie, good morning, welcome.
Good morning.
Also, Kofi Asare is the Executive Director of Africa Education Watch, and he was, amongst other things, one of the voices during the inception stages of the Free Senior High School program when the discussion was going on. So to help us understand, what was the original idea of the Free Senior High School program? Has it departed from what they actually discussed at the inception stage? What should be done going forward? Is the Executive Director of Africa Education Watch, one of the foremost CSOs in education space in Ghana and on the continent. Kofi Asare, good morning. Welcome. Also, we have in the guests who have joined us here in studio. Angel Kabono is the president of NAGRAT, is going to be joining us shortly. Also, Musa Tanko with the Ghana National Association of Teachers, General Secretary, is going to be joining us in a bit. Enoch Kwesi Jitwa is the president of the Ghana National Council of Private Schools. Mr. Jitwa is here. Thank you very much. Also, Charles Ahetochega, former Director General of the GES, will be joining us in a bit. Mr. Bright Apia is the Executive Director and founder of the Child Rights International. Mr. Bright Apia, thank you so much for coming. Also, Irene Nana Achia Yaboa, who's a parent. We need their voices. And then also Joshua Ansa Adafio is the TUC Deputy Secretary General as well. And then together with Na Sechere Adafio, they are here. Thank you very much. Also, we have Father Diodone, who is a Catholic with the Catholic Secretariat, and then also that's Emmanuel Asante, and then also the Chief Imam representative. They are all seated here as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for making the time to be part of this all-important progressive conversation on the Free Senior High School program. Thank you for coming. We go straight to hear from our speakers who will give a 10 minutes presentation. Then we would go into the discussion where your voices would also be heard about this Free Senior High School program. First to speak is our main speaker for this program, Professor Stephen Ade, former rector of GIMPA and Educationist. Please, let's put our hands together for him.
I didn't know that I'm a main speaker. I've sent you a bill, especially since you didn't recognize that I'm an economist.
Indeed.
And the older economist you are, the more money you need before you die. So, first of all, let me thank you for this invitation. I normally don't respond to many invitations by the media, including TV3, especially as sometimes you get a bit worried as to the agenda. But I believe that it's important that there must be a platform to discuss important national issues. And I want to congratulate TV3 for this, because at this moment there's practically no forum where people come and discuss things not from the point of the view of the two tribes. You know, the two tribes, NDC and MPP. But taking a national issue as the free SHS. Since I've been introduced as the main speaker, only knowing today, I think that I will spend all my 10 minutes, which you have given me. First, I should say that I am an avid supporter of free SHS. I believe that in this day and age, every child in Ghana must have access to education up to at least the high school level, and not constrained because their parents cannot afford it. I personally think that the free SHS will be one of the greatest legacy of His Excellency the President, irrespective of all that we'll be discussing as to how to treat it. It was also a constitutional requirement that Ghanaians will move towards that level. I stand here as someone who benefited from Nkrumah's policies. I was born in 1948, so I lived through all. And it's quite important. I didn't go to secondary school because there was no opportunity to go to secondary school. In my case, I thought that I probably could have gotten a scholarship if I could pay the admission fee. So therefore, I'm quite sympathetic to anyone who wants to offer free secondary education. And therefore, nobody, and I don't think there's any rational Ghanaian who would like to scrap the principle of free SHS. The second thing that I would say is that I anticipated that a free SHS will have problems. In fact, every country which has started, Kenya and other things, had challenges, and they dealt with them. The unfortunate thing is that in Ghana, of late, it's become as if a policy is a doctrine. Once it's there, you cannot talk about it. And when you talk about it, you are against all that things. No. I think it's a good policy, and I anticipated. In fact, I was consulted not in the preparation of the scheme, but when it has been done, the day before it was rolled out. And my response to the powers that be is that this is a good policy. When you implement it, there will be problems, and those problems must be addressed. And that is what, this is what I told His Excellency the President himself. And I also added that the young men and women who have brought this idea, work it out. Please, when there's a problem, don't make them scapegoats. Give them the opportunity because they'll be capable of addressing it. But of course, I was not talking like a politician, which I am not. Therefore, I believe that we should address the free HSS. It has come to stay. There are challenges to it, and the challenges must be addressed. On hindsight, and I think that there are some challenges that are being faced, even though I think that we must be very careful because of the haircut and the economic challenges that Ghana is facing. There's the tendency to say, oh, it's free HS, but I will leave, since I'm not recognized as an economist on this platform, I will leave it to the younger person. I want to say categorically that the free SHS is not the cause of the economic crisis. So let us separate them. The economic crisis has been the borrowing were not used actually to finance the free SHS. Neither was the free SHS that caused Ukraine or COVID. And therefore, I want us to make sure that what are some of the challenges that the current system is facing? Of course, you can list them as many as you can. First of all, I think that they have defined the free to be too free. It includes even getting physical education, clothing for children, getting them school uniforms. It means that every border is free, which is a discrimination between those who get admission to boarding and those who don't get admission to boarding. And I don't have a child, but if I have a child and you ask my child to be a day student and others should go, I will ask you to refund part of my tax to me because it is unfair. So there are various elements that are going on that we must look at, and we would be able to do so. However, we have to start somewhere, get the problems, and deal with them, not just, for example, I think that right from the beginning, excluding the private schools. I mean, I'm not talking about the elite private schools. The elite private schools won't allow the government to come in at all. But most of the private secondary schools, the lower level, had to close down because it's free. And their facilities are, you go to, for example, Swedro, Green Hill School, I believe that the government should have had some arrangement with them and then continue, rather than to say, it's government, private, don't come in. It will have cost the government less to have about 500 students there than to park them on Swedro Secondary School. So there has been a lot of things that can be looked at and make it better. At the moment, a significant amount of Ghanaians also, not the majority, would like to contribute to make the system successful. The free secondary school now excludes everybody because it is meant to be free. Of course, I don't like the idea that the Mfansi and the Wegehes and the Achimotans want that one to be given to them to run it, which means that for their children, which means by historical accident of your going there, your children should go there and other children should not go there. But there can be a way in which they can be accommodated. And I will show how that can be done in a specific case. So what I'm saying is that the free SHS is good. It is facing challenges. It must be tweeted and made better so that Ghanaians will ensure that no child is left behind. In the first place, let me talk about the way forward rather than dealing with always. But if we don't do something about it, the overcrowding, actually God loved us because I expected that during the COVID, our kids may die in their numbers. But God decided that, we are too poor. He shielded the youth, that most of the people who died. But there can be another viral or epidemic which can sweep. When you go and see how many students sleep in a room in some of the secondary schools, actually I shudder. You go to Prempeh College, meant for about 1,000 students, have about 5,000 students. And even before the free SHS, I went to Krobodumasi Secondary School. And I was shocked because there were 3 levels of the bed, now it's 3. And students had to squeeze to go on them. And so we have a serious one. So nobody should see anybody who thinks that we should improve free SHS is an enemy of a regime or anybody else. But it's good for Ghana that we do so. Let me say a few specific things as to the way forward. First of all, no country, and I say no country of significance, if you go to some small island, that's not, which offers free secondary school, provides boarding, free boarding to them. Nowhere. In America, I stayed there, my children grew up there when I was in the UN. Before then, my children were in school in Britain. I've lived in Namibia when I was the head of the UN there, in South Africa. No country can afford to maintain the inherited boarding system. Free SHS requires quality, and the emphasis is on quality community schools. And we have examples of that in my village. We have one of the best secondary schools in my village, believe it or not, of Shiramwasi. And it is a community secondary school. And it serves, the reason why the Achimotans don't know about it, that we serve only 12 villages for the first time. Let my villagers also enjoy small. And we have about 500 students. But we allow 1/5 of the positions for foreigners. Do you know who are the foreigners? If you don't come from the 12 villages, you are a foreigner. And while they are almost having free secondary school, because they pay only 700 a term for food, for clothing, for transport from their villages, from PE, for books. We have one of the best science lab with a Wi-Fi provided. We paid for it though by Vodafone and all the rest. But we allow 100 spaces, a small boarding. We allow the foreigners to come. And when you come, you pay 10,000 from this year, a year. So you rob Peter to pay Paul. So this is I think that we can have a system like that where we have community secondary schools, but can satisfy the Achimotans and the rest. If they want, they can pay for a certain slot. But there are several options. The second way, by way of the way forward, is we must, as I said, stop making free SHS a doctrine so that it is this. We started this way and it will be so forever. No, it must evolve. And in that way, it will become better. The third, by way forward, is that free SHS doesn't mean everything must be free. I believe that, in any case, it's not free for those who have to pay transport to go to school and don't have the boarding. And therefore, tuition must be free. The government must continue to pay for the teachers. They must continue to provide infrastructure. But I think that even the poorest parents may be willing to make a contribution with the peripheries. And those, we must give opportunity, as we are giving in Shiramwasi Christian High, for people who can afford the 10,000. And by the way, if I were to open it, the 10,000, they will sweep away all my villages, because for the past 5 years, apart from 3 students, we have gotten 100% WASI results consistently. They will come, these guys will send their children there. So we have made a rule. So you can do that. Again, I think that the average parent can support the free SHS with a certain minimal amount, and then those can pay. Last but not the least, because I see that my host is getting fidgety, but let me tell you, when you add all your ages and divide by 2, that's so. This the only place that being old is not a disadvantage is Ghana. But the last one,
You have more time. Yes.
let me say that it is statistically proven that the free SHS has not produced lower quality students than when there was no free SHS, except that we can go forward, because all throughout Ghana's history, believe it or not, about 40 to 50% of our students fail at SHS. And this is what I want to mention. And that has nothing to do with free SHS. It has to do with 2 things. And I hear the Nat and the other people are here. It has to do with the foundation in terms of primary school. The World Bank describes primary schools in Ghana as schooling without learning. And the average JHS person from the public school, apart from, is illiterate and enumerate. And for me, that's going to be one of my remaining short life challenges, which we have developed some work, which we are rolling out soon, about how to end schooling without learning, because we have found methods whereby the average 5 to 6 year old can be literate in 3 to 6 months. And very soon it will be rolled out, it will be on the net for free so that people can have access. Meanwhile, we are asking the elite to pay for the development costs. So by January, we will roll it out for free. The second has to do with the management of schools, because the reason why even the private poor schools return good result is supervision and accountability. And at this moment, the average public school, especially at the basic level, there's practically no accountability, and they are not delivering. And that is where, so it has nothing to do with the free HSS. I trust him, probably, just to go ahead. I believe that once we tweet and exclude the peripheries, have a way that there can be contribution from those who can, Ghana can afford a free SHS for every child that needs it. I thank you.
Wow. Professor Stephen Adey, thank you very much. Please, let's put our hands together once again. Thank you very, very much for this. And to be honest, with everything that you have done in this life and then contributing to the development of this country, if I want to go into your profile, I'm sure the next 1.5 hours will not be enough. So thank you so much for this and laying the solid foundation for this all-important conversation. Be honest, touching on all the salient areas that defines this conversation that we're going to be having this morning about the way forward and what has to be done. Certainly there are challenges, but accepting and then also listening to the suggestions on how to also solve these challenges is why we're here. Our next speaker is Dr. Peter Pate Anti, who is also going to be talking about some of the challenges with implementation as well as the real situation on the ground from the policy and the CSO's analysis perspective. Please, let's put our hands together for Dr. Peter Pate Anti. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alfred. Normally, when a professor speaks, we, the students, don't have much to add on, especially from my background as an academic. So I would not speak much, but point to one or two things that I think we need to start thinking through. We all agree, and as Prof have said, that education is very important. And any program that seeks to give opportunity for everybody to access education should be applauded. And that is why we have been supporting this policy from day one through write-ups, interviews, and other things, because we believe that the program needs to be sustained and it needs to go on. It should transcend political parties. It should transcend personalities. And that is why we will continue to support the policy. Now, policies have intended outcomes and then unintended outcomes. So normally when you are looking at a policy like the free senior high school, you are looking at what were the objectives of starting the policy. And that is clear because if you look at the logo, it tells you that the intention of the originators was to ensure that there is enough access for everybody to go into senior high school. There is quality and there is equity. So as somebody who's been trained as an evaluator, when you want to look at this policy, that is your first point of call. Has the policy been able to create the needed access? And I said, yes. The policy has created a lot of access. Most kids who technically would not have access to secondary education can now go to school. And that is a big deal. So we shouldn't downplay that. Because, of course, if you look at the literature, it tells you that when you remove the barrier of finance, what happens next is enrollment will shoot up. So that is something that we need to acknowledge. Again, we have to also look at equity. Equity in terms of various variables. In the first place, you can say that, yes, there's been some sort of equity in assessing secondary education when it comes to what we call the gender parity ratio. Because you agree with me that if you have a male and a female in the house, a boy and a girl, and you have limited resources, the economists will say, and you need to take one to school, the natural instinct will be, let's take the boy to school. But with free SHS, girls have access to school. And from 2016, where we have a gender parity ratio of 1:0.8, now we are doing 1:1.2, which means that even more girls are accessing secondary education as compared to boys. So you can't tell me that the policy is not good. The policy is good. Again, people who would not have had the opportunity to attend certain kinds of secondary schools have had access to go in there. So looking at how the placement has been carried out and all those things in between, you will see that there's some equity being achieved there. But the same equity variable has been downplayed because if you look at how we are financing the policy, you would agree with me that that technically is not equity. What we are doing is more of equality, which does not, I've said on several platforms, does not make sense to me. I mean, financial sense to me. So that is a problem that we will need to look at. Then we look at the quality aspect. And Prof said that the free SHS it's not the cause of the quality of education that we are experiencing. It could be true, but we also have to look at what variables do we use to measure quality education in Ghana. If you are using student-to-teacher ratio, if you are using student-to-textbook ratio, if you are using student-to-desk ratio, if you are using these variables to measure quality, and you have improved access, and because of that, these variables are suffering, you would definitely have a say or a point to say that these things are impacting on the quality of education that the students are going to get. But I would want to say that the future prospects of the policy is bleak. And I say this with all the strength that I have in me. Why am I saying that? You see, normally, policies are fed and then they produce what we call products. Now, how do we feed the free SHS policy? We feed them from those that are coming from the basic schools. Now, we all agree that our current basic school system is in tatters. there are constant complaints about capitation grants not going, their performance, and everything in there is not working. Now, I'm speaking about this and I'll link it to quality. So the products that are coming to feed the free SHS are not products that we are proud of. They are not products that are built to face, to acquire the needed kind of education that we can give them. So if we are not particular about the point of feeding of the policy, and that's why I'm saying that the future is bleak. If you are not particular about the point of feeding of the policy, we are going to have a very serious problem, because these kids that are being transitioned to senior high school do not have the kind of education that they need. Prof said that in Ghana we do schooling, we don't do education. So they are just going through the system, especially those who go through the public basic school system. It is an eyesore. It's not something that you would want your world to be. And I wouldn't be wrong if I count everybody here and none of our kids are in the public school, because we know the challenges in there. So these people are being fed into the free senior high school, and their quality is at stake. Now, those who are also going through the system, they would definitely graduate and then will come out. That is the product. What kind of education are we giving them? Are they designed in a way that they will be able to satisfy the things that we want them to do? Because what we are doing with free SHS is an investment, and the economists will agree with me. We are investing, and we need to get the needed returns. So you ask yourself, if I go through the 3 years of free education, which Prof and I agree that it is just schooling and not education, what am I going to do? What will be my contribution to the development of the country? Of course, because there are social benefits of education. We want crime rate to go down. We want maternity mortality rate to go down. We want child marriage to go down. We have a lot of social benefits of education. We have economic benefits of education. Can these kids going through the system be able to contribute to the development of the country in all aspects that we can talk about? So that is why I say that the future is bleak. The future is bleak because it is also not sustainable. And when we talk about the sustainability issue, people think that, oh, you want parents to pay. I don't think so. What I think is that we want another stream of income for the policy, so that if you have 60% coming from government, there's some 40% coming from somewhere. I don't care whether it's parents, I don't care whether it's an international grant, I don't care whether it's even taxes. But that 40% would always support the policy when the government is not able to do that. Let me give you a scenario. From 2017, what we have been doing is that we have been using part of the oil money, that is the ABFA, to support free senior high school. So government normally do 60 or 40 or 50, and then the other comes from the ABFA. In 2023, this year, we are doing 100% from the oil money. And we understand the reason why that is happening. It's because government is going through certain fiscal challenges and austerity and other things that they are doing. So it means that anytime government is in trouble, the policy will be in a big mess. And that is why you think about looking at the policy, you think about what other means can we find money to be able to support that which is coming from government. And I don't think that anybody who proposes this, who talks about this, who wants this to be the case, is somebody who is anti-free SHS or somebody who doesn't want the betterment of the policy. As I said, policy should transcend personalities. It should transcend political parties. It should transcend even generations. We will only be able to do that when this policy has a clear direction in terms of sustainability. And then the identified challenges are addressed. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Peter Partey, Dr. Peter Partey. Thank you. Sustainability, extremely important. So we don't subject our children to 3 years, 4 years, free, half free. Then, and it's a very, very, very important issue that you raised there. Thank you, Dr. Peter Partey. Appreciate you for this one. And for the sustainability proposals that you're making, I'm sure parents here and those who are watching us will rather want to contribute directly than to pay taxes, because that tax proposal, no, that one it's going to raise issues. But anyway, I mean, these are the reasons why we're here. It is the sustainability question that is one of the biggest that we seek to answer with this conversation this morning. If you're joining us now, we're having this TV3 National Dialogue on the Free Senior High School program in perspective, the progress, the problems, and the prospects. We're live on 3FM 92.7 as well. Let me just put it on record that we extended an invitation to the Ministry of Education. We received information just last night that they are unable to make it or to represent. But thankfully, we have someone who was part of the conversation at the inception stage of this Free Senior High School program to talk about the progress of the Free Senior High School program. And as you heard from our various speakers who have earlier spoken, they have indicated that this Free Senior High School program is good. But what is the way forward? So Kofi Asare, Executive Director of the Africa Education Watch. Please, let's put our hands together for him.
Thank you very much, Alfred. And I am grateful for the opportunity, Media General. I agree with both speakers, earlier speakers, that the Free Senior High School program is a good program, and that on the basis of that, it has to be improved to become better. In 2017, when discussions around the Free Senior High School program, when the discussions were taking place, the main problem from where I sat and my participation in the process was that about 33% of Ghanaian children who were completing basic education were not able to enjoy secondary education. Indeed, in that year, about 110,000 BECE graduates were unable to transit into secondary. Now, we all appreciate that secondary education is important, and it is more important considering the fact that for the next 25 years, Africa remains the youthful population of the world. About 60% of Africa's under 25. Africa has about 60% of its population being under 25. And the meaning is that once we have about 60% of our population being under 25, it means that we have the most youthful population in the world. The meaning is that the world will fall on us for critical manpower required to propel global economic development. Again, the meaning also for a country like Ghana is that how we manage this youthful population will either become a blessing or a curse. Bear in mind that every year Africa produces about 11 million new entrants into the world market, into the world of work or the labor market. But out of this 11 million, we are only able to provide jobs for 3.7 million. So there's a huge gap between the skills required, if you like, within the world of work or by industry, and the skills that our products, the products of our educational system possess. That gap is critical. And for you to appreciate, or for us to appreciate the relevance of free secondary education, we must understand that our secondary education system must be first accessible to this teeming number of youth that are dominating our population. And then also the quality must improve to make them relevant to the world of work. So when the discussions were taking place, I actually appreciated why we needed a free senior high school. No wonder government set out the policy's objective to be, among others, expand equitable access to secondary education and improve its quality, including STEM, and ensure that there's a prudent financial management of the system. And government anchored all this on the philosophy of Article 25, 1B. We all know where the Constitution talks about equal access to educational opportunities and facilities. The B more specific to the progressive introduction of secondary education. Now, what has happened since? Government rolled out the program in 2017 with 4 key interventions. I mean, 3. The first was that at that time, there was a cut-off to secondary education. and it was around aggregate 36, which meant that any student who had more than aggregate 36 at BECE could not progress to a public secondary school. That cutoff was one of the reasons why 33% of BECE graduates were not transiting to senior high school. So government removed that cutoff and came with a new cutoff, sort of, which simply said that once you are not getting 9 in maths and English, you will go to secondary school. So that's about idea 52. So 36, 52, automatically the numbers will increase. Because if you look at YS grading system, you virtually add 30% more to the numbers if you stretch the cutoff from 36 to 52. The next thing government did was to remove direct cost barriers to secondary education. Admission fees, feeding fees, and other fees in the school, you know, SRC, library, uniforms, and all fees that were previously paid by parents were absorbed by government. So parents were still providing some items on the prospectus, but not the regular fees and what we call the regular financial impediments to access to secondary education, which was great. And the third thing government did was to begin expanding access by expanding infrastructure and facilities. So within a short period of time, we saw an increase in enrollment, obviously because of these 3 key interventions. Government was able, or government has been able to date, to increase what was a 66% transition from basic to secondary to 92%. So almost 30 percentage points increase in transition. And that is remarkable. Second thing is that, obviously, in terms of real numbers, enrollment increased from about 800,000 to 1.3 in terms of the full cohort in the school environment. That is fantastic. In fact, if you look at YS grading system, the star 9 system, there's a 4% of candidates who always get 9, 4%. And so at a point when you are reaching 92% transition, then it means that only about 4% of BECE candidates are not going to secondary. Because if 4% will get 9 in maths or English per the star 9 system, then it means that if you are doing 92% transition, then only 4% of those who qualify for secondary per the new, you know, per the new cutoff are not going. Statistically, that is what it means. And so the policy has made enough progress. In terms of quality, as Prof said, there's no evidence that the output of the policy is bad. At least the only measure we have is WASI. And the WASI results that have been churned out since then to date indicates that there have been significant improvements. In mathematics, for instance, performance has increased from about 33 to about 60. In English language, increased from 51 to 60. Integrated science from 48 to 62. And I'm talking about between 2016 and now, 2022. Social studies from 54 to 71. This is because government has been intentional in investing in what it calls interventions in the senior high schools. Yes, double track existed and still exists in a form now. But you see, government invested in the intervention, which is more or less an extra classes, extra teaching for the students, and paid teachers extra to do that. And so even though the number of days students were spending in school reduced because of the double track, the instructional hours actually increased because weekends were all utilized as part of the interventions. And when you have a deliberate effort to resource schools, provide adequate textbooks for them, provide interventions, i.e. extra classes, to provide extra tuition for them, and etc., you would definitely expect to see some improvements in learning outcomes if WIEC assessment can be called a learning outcome. And that is why I also subscribe to the idea that there is no data to suggest that the policy is low on quality. But however, we must avert our minds to one thing, that the education sector is funded from one envelope. And in that envelope is tertiary, basic, and secondary. From that envelope is basic, secondary, and tertiary financed. Now, how you deploy resources from that envelope will determine how balanced you are able to develop all the three subsectors. If resources are deployed inequitably, you have a situation where one part of the, or some part of the three segments of the system will be more developed against the others. We also agree that without resources, you can't develop education, because all I enumerated about the beautiful story of the Free Senior High School is because of a deliberate policy to finance it. Now, why am I saying so? Whilst we are recording this beautiful outcome from Free Senior High School, if you look at the pre-tertiary budget, I'm talking about basic and secondary budget of the Ministry of Education, this year, for instance. Take out salaries, because salary is normally non-discretional, okay? You can't vary salaries because you already have teachers and workers in the education sector. Take out salary, we call it non-discretionary budget. If you analyze the non-discretionary budget of the Ministry of Education for this year, for instance, you realize that basic education is taking about 4%. 4%. And the remaining 96% is taken by secondary education. And the discretionary budget of the ministry is that budget that the ministry can vary. You know, that is the only budget that can vary. That's what they used to buy goods and services, and then also to build schools. So goods and services capex, teaching and learning materials, building schools, infrastructure, training. 96% of that discretionary budget is going to secondary education and TVET, and only 4%. So that 4% is the reason why you will hear capitation grants not being released in about 2 years. That 4%, which has been dwindling, it used to be about 19% in 2016. So it has been declining since we started investing in free secondary education in 2014. It has been declining from 2014 all the way to now at the point of 4%. So far as we maintain the free senior high school program in this way, that basic education share of the Ministry of Education discretionary budget will continue to decline. And it will be the reason why you will not be seeing basic schools being built the way they should be building. They should be built, or they should be springing up. It should be the reason why you won't be seeing adequate textbooks, underlying adequate textbooks in our basic schools. And it will be the reason why we'll also not be seeing capitation grant being disbursed to our public basic schools timely. So I believe that a way out of this is to fashion out an approach where those who reasonably should be able to afford some aspect of the free senior high school budget should support government. And this is what I believe in. I believe that at the basic level, 30% of students are from private schools. So let's assume, and that is not far from the reality, that 30% of BECE students who enter senior high school came from private schools. That is one. 2, we know that about 40% of private schools are low-cost private schools. And what I mean by low-cost is that some of them are makeshift schools. They are patronized by people who are poor, but they have no option because they live in Oyibi, and there's only one public school in Oyibi, but there are about 20 private schools. So if they don't enroll them in these schools, they cannot have an education. Poor people. So let's take out the 40%, meaning that 60% of the 30% that will transfer from private schools into senior high schools are from regular public schools, private junior high schools. Averagely, $100 a term is how much a parent spends on a child in junior high school. A term, only $100. And I'm talking about fees, books, and direct school expenses. I'm being very charitable. If I had transport, $100, that's 1,100, 1,200 cedis. So it means that a parent whose child attends private junior high school should be able to afford 1,000 cedis. 1,000 cedis a semester, not a term, a semester. If we ask private school, the 60% who are attending regular private school, moving to senior high school, to pay 1,000 cedis a semester for feeding, just 1,000 cedis a semester under free senior high school, which is 2,000 cedis a year, we will be raising close to 500 million Ghana cedis to support the government budget. Why support the government budget? Because Peter will tell you that between 2018 and now, Finance Ministry has not been able to disburse more than 65% of the free senior school allocation. There's a liquidity issue. That's why you hear about the food crisis. So when you have those who can pay, contributing something, it will provide some liquid for the Ministry of Education to have some, a breather, and then sort out the issues that bring the food issues. So that when Finance Ministry is unable to bring funding timely, which has been the case for the past 5 years, you are able to have some liquid to manage the system without the system suffocating. That is how I think people who are in the capacity to support government implement the free senior high school can participate. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kofi Asare, giving us further information on the progress and why we should all be concerned about the sustainability of this policy. If 4% of the discretionary budget of the Ministry of Education is going to the basic level, we cannot certainly be building a superstructure on a weak foundation if we're thinking about sustaining this policy. It is the numbers that he gives that leads us to the next stage of this conversation about the economic sustainability, the financial structure that we have for this free senior high school program as we speak, and whether it can be sustained in its current form. The one to speak to this is Dr. Edu Osusakode. He's an economist. Please, let's put our heads together for him. Thank you.
Hi, Alfred. Thank you very much, and good morning to you all. It was a privilege sitting by the renowned economist. Prof, your student is here. Please lower the marking scheme for me. So I also support the free SHS in principle. I've said this on every platform that I find myself, that I would have gotten my first choice high school if there was free SHS at that time. I started my school, high school education in 2000. Because the objective of free SHS is to increase enrollment without compromising quality, and that no child of school-going age should be denied access to education. And I think I'm supposed to speak about financing, but let me lay this background why I support the free SHS from an economic point of view and from also social point of view. Number one is that if you take a look at the GLSS 6, looking at the population of Ghana, you're looking at those who have completed SHS plus, high school plus. It's less than 20%. And Kofi, you can correct me. It's less than 20%. So you want a population, you want your economy to grow, a middle-income country like Ghana, you want us to transform with 20% senior high school plus education, no way. Then you come to those who are working, those who are supposed to grow our GDP. It's also less than 30%, it's about 28% or so. Less than 30% of workers in Ghana have SHS plus education. I'm adding the tertiary level 2. And it is documented in the literature that the social benefit of secondary education is higher than the social benefit of tertiary education. The tertiary education has been enjoying government subsidy, government support. There has not been any call for a review or a cancellation. Now, secondary education is enjoying government support, and some people are calling for a cancellation. And I think my brother mentioned the social benefits like crime, controlling crime, mortality, reproductive health, all these things, the benefits accumulated together is higher than the tertiary education. That is why in economic principles, I support the free SHS. Then when we are talking about inclusive growth, we are in the IMF program. One of the strongest pillars of the IMF program is inclusive growth. And we also know from the literature that one of the first things you look at when you're talking about inclusive growth is education. Everybody having access to education because of productivity. Now, my understanding of this is that it is not the case that whoever goes to high school should go to the tertiary school. It is not the case. We are looking at the productivity of those in the high school, those who qualify from the high school. And a typical example, if you go to the restaurants that we have, the caterers or the cooks or the service, those who serve us, those with high education, you see the quality, you see the hygiene, that is the productivity we are talking about. But those, you know, in other areas where the cook and the servers do not have secondary education, you see the quality, the low quality in hygiene, etc., etc. Then let me also touch on the review, what I've heard about the review. Before I go to the financing, I read the IMF document, and the IMF document is saying that free SHS has increased enrollment, but it's poorly targeted. And I read that document and I asked the IMF staff that what is poorly targeted? Well, how do you define poorly targeted? No definition. It was just put there. And number two, the IMF did not recommend what would be a proper targeting in the document. Okay, so maybe they leave it to us for us to do the review. And these are the reviews I've heard. Number one, that the poor must be made to enjoy and the rich be made to pay. But I do not support that because you need data to do that, what we call the discrimination, quote unquote. You need data to successfully implement that kind of targeting to discriminate the rich from the poor. My second point of not supporting that type of targeting is the direct tax system in Ghana is progressive. In other words, the direct tax burden falls more on the rich than the poor. So already the rich is paying huge sums of money in terms of taxes in the country. Then the other review, the other targeting I've heard, which I do not support, I think Kofi mentioned it, that those from public basic schools, is that your point, should, those from public, okay, maybe that's not your point, but let me say this. Those from public school, the ones we call Saito, should enjoy free SHS, and those who go to private basic school should not. Again, I do not support that argument. And the other one that maybe I'm tempted to support is the one proposed by Prof about a boarding fee, that it should be a tuition fee free tuition fee, but the boarders must be paid to, must be made to pay the boarding fee. That I'm tempted to support, but with a caveat. The caveat is that in every review, we must be careful about the cost-saving element. Or the discussion we are having here, I'll go to the finances because people think that it is putting so much burden on government. But if after the review, we have not been able to save any significant amount of money, then there was no need for that review. So every review that we make to the free SHS must give us a significant cost-saving element. Other than that, I may not support it. Now let's go to the finances, the meat of my argument. The free SHS cost has risen from 0.8 billion Ghana cedis to 1.2 billion cedis to 1.6 billion, 1.8, 2.4, 2.8, and now we are talking about some 3.2 billion Ghana cedis. 3.2 billion, 3 billion cedis, you might think that it's a huge money, but it's not. And Prof asked me to explain this, that is the free SHS the cause for Ghana's woes, economic woes? No. Is the free SHS putting so much financial burden on government? I say no. And I have my reasons. My reason is that we are running away from responsibility, both from the government, from us in academia, from you in the media, from everybody. What is that responsibility? The responsibility is to look for serious, sustainable financing to keep the free SHS running and get rid of the problems. And I repeat, when you meet a problem in life, you don't run away from the problem. You find a way to resolve it. Deal with the problem. Do not throw away the dirty water with the baby. Separate the baby from the dirty water and throw away the water and keep the baby. So for you to say, or for anybody to say that 3 billion is causing so much burden on government, therefore cancel it or review it, my rebuttal is the government should rather look for extra funding elsewhere to keep it running. Don't run away from the problem. Deal with the problem. And how do we deal with it? I think that's why you invited me. Number one is the property rate. The property rate or the property tax. According to a research that I cited in 2016, the property tax revenue is expected to be 2% of GDP. This was 2016. Without digitization, I'm sure with digitization, it will be more than 2% of GDP. But let's keep the 2% of GDP. Ghana's GDP is estimated to be 599 billion cedis this year. So let's say about 600 billion Ghana cedis. 2%, only 2% of the 600 billion Ghana cedis is 12 billion cedis. So even if we take a look at just the property rate, the revenue from the property rate, 2% of GDP this year, if we were serious as a country to provide funding from free SHS, we can raise 12 billion cedis out of the property rate. So the argument of the rich being made to pay will be resolved from the property rate because it is the rich that have the property. So once you tax the property, you have the revenue, and it's a wholesale free SHS, which I support. And 12 billion, with this current expenditure of free SHS, the 12 billion can finance free SHS for 3 years. So 1 year revenue from the property rate can finance free SHS for 3 years. That's how sustainable it can be. Number two, the tax exemptions. The tax exemptions is costing this country between 1% to 2% of GDP. Tax exemptions, those who do not pay tax, those who enjoy tax rebates. Tax exemptions. Now, per my estimation, 1.5% of today's GDP will be 9.6 billion Ghana cedis. 9.6 billion Ghana, that's more than 3 times the expenditure of free SHS. So if you need money, go and review the tax exemptions and then get some money from there. And this one, I'm even being generous because it can go as high as 12 billion, the tax exemptions. And now, the major one. So I've mentioned 2. I think, my brother, let me say this before. You mentioned the oil revenue, which I agree. According to the research again, the oil revenue, the impact of the oil revenue on household income in Ghana is estimated to be 0.1%. I repeat, the oil revenue impact on the incomes of households in Ghana is estimated to be 0.1%, very negligible, minimal. And therefore, it means that you have few people enjoying the oil revenue as against the many. And so if the government in its wisdom is saying that, well, he wants every Ghanaian to enjoy the oil revenue through free SHS financing, I support it completely, 100%. And then, is my time up? Okay, 2 minutes. Okay. Now, the bigger fish, the extractive sector. The extractive sector. Ghana is the #1 producer of gold in Africa. Last year, we produced $6.6 billion of gold, not million, billion dollars of gold, just 1 year. Ghana is #1. How can the #1 producer of gold in Africa not be able to find money to finance free SHS? Oil. We produce oil amounting to $4.2 billion in 1 year, just last year. Put the two together, we are talking about $12 billion. Use the exchange rate and do the math. How can't we finance free SHS with our oil, our extractive sector? Botswana is doing it, Saudi Arabia has done it, Norway has done it, all our rich, resource-rich countries are doing it, and Botswana. Prof, I don't know if you can correct me, I don't know, I've heard that Botswana education is free from crèche to tertiary. And the value of Botswana's extractive sector is 60% that of Ghana's. So if somebody who is having 60% is doing free education up to tertiary, how much more you, that is the #1 producer of gold in Africa, producing $6.6 billion of gold, produce $4.2 billion of crude oil, and you are telling me that you cannot finance free SHS? The money is here. We should not run away from the problem. Let's deal with it. Free SHS has come to stay, and we must keep it running and have suggested ways, sustainable ways of financing it. My fourth argument is the use of finance. The fourth argument is the use of tin as a requirement to enjoy free SHS. Tin. As a country, we should not run away from tax payment. Even if you have to pay 1 cedi, pay it, show your tin. If you want your child to enjoy free SHS, which has been financed by other sources, show your tin before we admit your child. The tin must be a requirement for the admission of children into the education. I'm sure you give me a chance to say more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Please, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Edu Owusu Sarkodie. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your thoughts as well on this. And the financial regime for this free SHS program is what has been under scrutiny now. Because, in fact, if you agree that the boarding component should be taking off, then that's more like taking off about 70% of the spending regime of the free senior high school funding now. Because from what I get, Kofi, and Peter, about 60 to 70% of the budgetary allocation for free senior high school is spent on feeding.
Yeah.
So exclusive of teachers' salaries. Yeah. So 60% of the 2.3 billion for this year is going to feeding. So if the boarding component is off, then there'll still be more money to do other things and also dedicate a lot more to the basic education level. But anyway, that's why we're having this conversation about sustainability. And let me just remind you that we're live on 3FM 92.7, also live on TV3 Ghana on Facebook, DSTV channel 279, all across the world on 3news.com. For those of you who are watching us, you're part of the conversation. You can send us the messages on Facebook. We're going to be getting into more of those messages. We've seen tons and tons of your messages on Facebook already. The hashtag we're using this morning is TV3 National Dialogue. Hashtag TV3 National Dialogue across all social media platforms. And let me acknowledge the presence of Angel Kabonu, who is the president of the National Association of Graduate Teachers, NAGRAT. Mr. Kabonu, good morning, welcome. Great. Also, we have with us Madame Bernice Imperi, who is the coordinator of the Ghana National Education Campaign Coalition, GENEC, together with Curtis Howard as well. Thank you so much for coming. We would go into the audience in a bit, but there was that question about the poor targeting that you mentioned the IMF raised in their document. Sorry, is the free SHS in this current form targeted in any way, even to talk about it being poorly targeted? Your microphone is activated.
Yeah, so I saw that description in the IMF Memorandum of Economic and Social Policies, and I also asked the same question, because a policy can be poorly targeted when it is targeted, and the targeting has deficiencies. But the IMF made that statement. They actually found 3 problems of our education system in the memorandum. They mentioned the poor learning outcomes at the primary level, low investment, and then recommended the need for enhancing teacher training, and then also provision of more resources for primary education as solutions. But when they identified the poor targeting for secondary education, they didn't go ahead and make a recommendation. They ended there. Yeah. But government came out to explain that it wasn't the original intention, and it is still not the intention of government to target the policy anyway. That's how government responded to that. And so the targeting, so government has indicated that it is not that it is poorly targeted, but its original intention was to implement a wholesale free. Yeah. And so there is no problem, and that the current architecture of the policy is a deliberate one. Okay. But let me quickly end by saying that I'm just asking you a simple question. According to SHS, by 2018, Ghana was losing $3 billion a year to corruption. How much is $3 billion today? Is it not 30 billion?
Yes.
Which means that I can also say that if we end corruption, we can save 30 billion and make perhaps basic, secondary, and tertiary education fully free, right? The danger in projecting it, the danger in doing fiscal policy analysis, the danger in projecting fiscals you don't have, is where we find ourselves, because you can get 1.5% of GDP through property tax. You can. And you can get about 2% of GDP from exemptions. The law has been passed. The law was passed in September last year. Okay. But the reality is that you may or will not get it. You understand? So the danger is that, yes, most of the fiscal analysis and projections, giving prudent revenue mobilization, will always point to a direction where how much we need to sustainably fund free senior high school is just there. But the reality is that it's not there. It's very far from us, because all the assumptions or the prerequisites that must happen for that money I'm mentioning to be there will never happen. So you wait forever to get 2 billion from property rates. You wait forever to get 1.5% of GDP from exemptions before you sustain a very important policy. So that is the challenge that normally we have with such.
In a minute, Dr. Zainte, you wanted to add something?
Yes, I wanted to talk about the IMF thing. If you look at where that statement was made, they brought it under social interventions. Yeah. So my question was, how was the policy presented to the IMF? Because it's based on how you presented the policy, that is why they would also want to address it that way. Because all social interventions are targeted. And that is why maybe they made that particular statement. So we should look at it from that perspective. How was the policy presented to the IMF?
I say thank you. And Prof, this one in a minute. Is the formula for measuring learning outcomes only limited to examination results? Because every time questions and concerns have been raised about the free senior high school program, government points us to the WASSCE results, that it's an answer to the quote-unquote naysayers of the free senior high school policy, that WASSCE results are good. That's one of the major ways, as far as we do know, of measuring the performance of this free senior high school program. Is the measurement of the learning outcomes only limited to examination results?
No, it's not limited to that alone, but it is the major one. That's where you start from. I mean, when you take your child to school, you don't say that, he can come back well-dressed and everything else, but fail. So, but definitely, there are, I founded a private secondary school, and we have 4 outcomes, which we are equal. But I was speaking to the faculty yesterday. I said, look, I cannot compromise on the results. We should be the best. But secondly, we are concerned about the moral education. We are talking about the health. We maintain strictly 1 to 10 teacher-student ratio because we want them to be mentored. And so there are other things you look at, but you cannot sidestep the fact that you take your child to secondary school to come up with a pass.
Thank you, Professor Stephen Adai. Let's go to Mr. Bright Appiah, who is Executive Director of Child Rights International, because he's concerned about the basic level as well, because we cannot pretend that we are only improving secondary education at the expense of basic education and there wouldn't be a problem when that foundation is what the superstructure that we are building at secondary level will be sustained upon. So, Ms. Appiah, I want you to speak about the situation with the basic education level now. What's going on?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I think Kofi touched on it in terms of the expenditure that we're making in that sector, and how that can also feed where we are making more investment, especially when it comes to the secondary education. So for me, it is important that we give equal attention to all the stages, especially the foundational stages. And because of also political commitment, you see more of this investment at the secondary school level. And that for me also raises a whole lot of issue as to whether the system can only, because of political commitment, can favor a particular policy because it's coming from a certain direction, or we look at education in totality to see how we can structure investment in that sector so that it be beneficial. Because if you look at the health sector, for instance, they've been very consistent in terms of its policy rollout. But when you pick the education sector, it's met with a lot of political agenda and all that. So it makes it very difficult for you to come to a certain conclusion in terms of the consistency that we want to see in that sector. So the capitation grant, as they've said, has suffered a lot of things because we are not making a lot of noise about it. Early childhood education is very serious. We are not really paying much attention about it. But these are systems established to feed where we are making more investment. So it's important that we look at all these sectors to ensure that, yes, we give it a priority. And to even look at it more from the perspective that it raised from it. Doc talks about the social environment. Kofi talks about the economic, in terms of looking at it purely from economic point of view. And then Prof also made mention of issues relating to how good the policy is. However, we think that certain leverages must be considered in the process. But to look at it from Prof's point of view first, I will talk about the way we have structured our secondary education system. It is true that when you go to other countries, it's a community schools. So therefore, you expect that their policies will be tailored towards that angle. But when you come to our side, if you look at the way we have even built our secondary school, we envisage that it's going to be a boarding system. Therefore, if government is developing policy, then it will target. But to say that those who are to access it from that point of view should pay, will demand a lot of explanation as to why that should be. Because the example that he cited, they have a different philosophy guiding the way and manner they run education. So it is important for Prof to also give us more light on why, that comparison and why he thinks that, they should also pay for the fees. Again, Doc, you made mention of a very critical point that no matter how we look at it, free education is a social policy. It's not only looking at economic gains, it's also looking at the social investment that you are making and the benefit that we have, and you touched on it. So I would also want to get it from your point of view. If you say the future is bleak, with all the embellishment that you're giving to the policy, by concluding that the future is bleak, based on certain factors, I still feel that we will need more explanation to it, because how the policy from our point of view, I think that if we address some of the issues that Prof raised in it, we should be able to run this program effectively. And Kofi's point is valid from the perspective that if we have this X amount of money and we are investing, then we should be very careful in terms of how we use that X amount. But let's also avert our mind that when we were even implementing this particular policy, we didn't envisage that government will even fund it to this level. One of the major issues that we raised to government is that government should be able to clearly define where the financing is going to come from. So if government is able to do that, then the suggestions that Doctor is giving from the economic point of view as to we should look for other sources of funding to fund secondary education, I think that is appropriate. Because if we also we didn't project that we will come this far, but we are here. It does not mean that we cannot do more. So I suggest that, yes, it is true that the little that we have, we should distribute it enough for all sectors to get it. But however, we should also have it as planned to envisage that there are other sectors that we can also advise government on to get money to finance our education in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bright-Apia. I'll come to Mr. Angel Carbonneau and then, Madam, to you as well. So, and then Mr. Jetua, and yes, so I have them. Mr. Carbonneau, so can we talk about the review of this policy without touching on the financing structure as we speak? Because Dr. Dosu Sarkodie makes the point that it can be wholly financed by government regardless, but you are on the ground. You are faced with a situation and all what is happening to the policy as we speak. Can that continue?
Well, thank you very much. I thought the philosophers told us that an unexamined life is not worth living. So what on earth can you tell me ought not to go under review? Life itself ought to be reviewed every morning when you wake up from your bed. And there can't be an aspect taken out from the review process, because It's more or less like a collective whole that presents to you something that is tangible. For me as a school teacher, I walk to the schools every morning and I see the schools deteriorate. And that is where my concern is. The philosophies and the theories don't matter to me. What matters to me now, here and now, is that the schools are deteriorating and they are deteriorating fast. I teach in St. Mary's Secondary School, Kolegono. And when I go to my school and I walk to the administration, I see that things are falling apart gradually. Go to Wesley Girls, talk to the headmistress of Wesley Girls. Go to Ebury Girls. And I'm talking about the so-called Ivory League schools. I've not mentioned VACBO, I have not mentioned FIDIM and all those other ones. So what is happening? What is happening is that resources are not coming adequately. And even when they come, they don't come timeously. Because the resources are coming from a source, and that source is under a certain pressure. So government will bring resources to create a semblance of a school running. That is why government is concentrating on the feeding. Because the teacher's salary is from source, it's from central government. So if the students are there and they are being fed, at least they are in school. The teachers will go and teach them. So there is semblance of the schools operating. And that is what we are doing. The other thing that we need to look at critically is that before Get Fund, Ghana was providing schools and facilities. Then we brought in Get Fund, where a percentage of our incomes will be taxed for education. What has happened to the Get Fund? The Get Fund is being capped. And as a matter of fact, the monies that's supposed to go to Get Fund do not go to Get Fund completely, and we all know why. Then we were there and we said, oh, we want to help fund health. So you bring in a health levy. We're collecting the health levy. Government said, look, my kitty is getting low, so they take part of the... So whatever you bring, whatever taxes you impose on these people, the huge and unending stomach of government will be so much that government will pick from it. So the grand theories will look appealing, but the reality is absolutely different. For me, I'm saying that if we are, and are you aware that there's gradually an upsurge of private senior high schools springing up within the periphery of Accra? Go to Kaswa. Go to the peripheral area. And why are those schools getting patronage? The objective of a parent sending his or her child to school is to get quality education. That is why our basic public schools got destroyed, especially in the urban and peri-urban areas. And when you come to Accra, gradually, the Accra and Central Kumasi, majority of basic school students are within the private schools and not within the public schools, though the private schools are more expensive. So that should tell you it's not the presence of the school, but the type of education that is being given. And I am telling you that these schools are getting patronage, and gradually we will find a very nice name for our public senior high schools. Maybe we'll call it Ajayanki like we call the other one Saito. The last thing that I like to say is that a parent sent the second daughter, to a private school around Kaswa. And the total school fees, that is boarding and tuition, was around 6,000 cedis. The first daughter is in a Ebury Girls Senior High School, and it's supposed to be free. But when she sat down and did the calculation of expenditure, one official, one unofficial, the unofficial expenditure to Ebury amounted more than the 6,000 that she was paying with certainty. Because with the 6,000, she's certain that the child is going to get good food, so she does not worry. But every weekend, she sends food to Ebury. She buys books, she buys this, she pays private teachers, she pays private tuition, and so on and so forth. The amount of money this woman is spending per term on the child is more at Ebury than the private school in Kaswa. So the charade can sound sweet. The politicking, the sloganeering and the cliches can be there, but the reality is totally different from what is being put before us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Madam, please. Yes, let's hear from Madam.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Nayeli Adefiu Secretary. I'm representing the Deputy Secretary General of the Trade Union Congress.
Thank you.
And I am excited about this conversation, and I am a beneficiary of the free SHS. My daughter happened to be the very first, among the first batch of students that went to the school, Labone Secondary School. So I really appreciate. But then at a point during her time in school, I was asking myself, is this really free? Because I like Angel just said, there were so many things I was paying for, I wasn't sure anymore. I just had to keep on keeping on until she exited, you know, the school. So the other point also I want to make is that with reviews, my short life on earth, I've seen that when we're reviewing, especially with the problems in our educational sector, the reviews are done, for me personally, some way, somehow. Just like you pointed out, Alfred, I mean, why shouldn't the Ministry of Education be represented here? And you did say that, well, last minute, they couldn't come to their party. Why? And I realized also that when these, especially situations or conversations or discussions are going on, especially for our educational sector, it's not wholly representative of everybody that has to be at the table. And we must look at that. For me, it's a big deal when we're doing reviews and it's not thorough. We had just been told that when you look at the basic level, you have the SHS, and then you have the basic through the three streams. The onus and the focus is on one more than the other. I think that those synergies must be built so that for people who are ordinary people who are sending their parents, their children through the system, we would have our money's worth if we have to contribute. And I don't mind paying as a parent to send my children through the school because I didn't ask for free SHS anyway. You know, even though a constitution and legal documents may require that, I am ready because that is the reason I go to work to take care of my family. And that is, for me, I should be given the opportunity to do that. So if it is decided as a country, this is the way to go, let us look at what would, and then also not just, of course, we have operated this system for 5 years, I understand. Doing a review of it, let's do a thorough review, you know, and include all the areas that are being talked to us about now. And for me, I agree with you absolutely, Kofi. If we should do away with corruption thoroughly, we should be able to fund our education as we have been told. Sometimes it's too painful. You don't know if the people who are supposed to be managing us are the ones, or we are the ones who are actually not, you know, giving them the support that they are supposed to have. Sometimes you just get confused. And I want to ask, why are poor private schools, as we have been told, not part of the free SHS? Is there an answer to that? I would really want to know why. Thank you. Well,
Madam, let me stay with you. What are some of the things that you were paying for, even though your daughter was said to be enjoying, or the
was
free
supposed
SHS,
to have been enjoying
free SHS?
I paid for, in fact, when she finished everything, and that's where I want to begin, I paid for the books, the textbooks that were given to her.
The textbooks?
Yes, and they were returned to, I don't know if it was back to the school, I don't know where, but I had to pay for the textbooks.
The textbooks that you paid for were returned to the schools?
Yes, they were returned. She didn't get to keep them, they were returned to the school.
You said fee.
So that's...
I think Prof says it's user fee.
Or maybe they were user fees, but I paid for those. Wow. Yes. And she was given a free boarding, but at every point in time, you had to take food to the school.
You were taking food?
Yes. And that was a time when, around the COVID time, but every now and again, she'll call you, I need this, I need that. And most of the time, it's not the little things that they would normally ask for, but you actually had to, you know, smuggle food to her every now and again. Wow. You know, and then I was wondering, okay, so if you're being given food in the night, this is supposed to be free, so is it free tuition or exactly what? You know, so that if I got to know what I am dealing with, then, and then, in fact, you don't get to have all the information from those who were managing because they weren't sure what to tell you, you know.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Wow. There's been a lot of talk about the private schools. So, Mr. Gentua, yes, let me hear from Mr. Madam, I'll come to you, please. Yes, the private schools. Do you offer to be part of the free senior high school policy? I know you've been having engagement with the education ministry. Why are you not part, or what did they tell you?
Thank you very much. This is very interesting dialogue that should happen always, so that most of the unknown issues in education will really be told to all the Ghanaians. If you look at the triangular shape of the free SHS, it sits on equity, access, and more or less quality. And you can't remove a barrier in order to ensure that everybody have access to school without ensuring that you have adequate facility to support whatever you are doing. A simple analysis will tell you that the JHS schools that we have, currently those who even wrote the BEC, the participating schools, were about 18,983. And we are hoping that all students will get access to the not more than 1,000 senior high schools in Ghana, even including the private schools. Not more than 1,000 senior high schools in Ghana, i.e. whatever this political party built, whatever we are using and all that. So the fact is that definitely we are going to have congestion issues in their senior high schools. And if you want to expand access, it does not necessarily mean that always you have to build, give contracts to other people so that cement and blocks will have to be laid down so that you can show that you are expanding access. Before the introduction of the free senior high schools, private schools were, the private senior high schools were about 343, matching the 721 public senior high schools in the country. And private schools decided that we love the policy because it's ensuring that every child is supposed to be in school. And its attribute in terms of development and everything, we uphold to that. So we want to partner the government to ensure that students will have access to our schools. And then that kind of user fee, or because definitely when the facility is being used, wear and tear will set in and you need to maintain it.
Okay.
Let us have that dialogue. But, you know, Prof mentioned something like doctrination. The policy is being seen that we brought it, and it is not owned by Ghanaians. And for that matter, whatever discussion that cogent, justifiable means that you put forth, it will not be looked at it. So there has been a lot of engagement up to the office of the president, to the minister, and all that.
And what's been the response? That's what I want to find out.
The response is that the Constitution forbid more or less a private investor to be supported in this regard because this is private school. And the private school has registered the institution as a limited by shares. And limited by shares is being influenced by profit making. So if government is spending, let's say, state monies or state resources in that, then it will open up the gap for people to come and say that then we are also coming. But we do forget that we are talking about education, where the Constitution itself, Article 25, Clause 2, also grants the private schools to run. and be supported. So if you look at it in that purview, the understanding that was given is not justifiable. There's no justification of it, because as we speak now, Prof mentioned some schools. When you go to Kumasi or Boase, there are good schools that have better infrastructure and better, deliverable materials to support this policy. But because the conversation itself is not all opened for parents and major stakeholders to make input and for it to be considered, it becomes very difficult for the private schools to be added. So that is the story. And
well, Mr. Jeff, thank you. In fact, I needed that response. We're not done yet, but thank you for that one. Thank you very much. I want to take, Madam, the last comment from the first engagement with our stakeholders. I'll come back to the panel here. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, but I want us to draw our attention to something, that in our education sector, are we only interested in coming out with a policy without looking at how the policy will be implemented or sustained? We have so many beautiful policies within the education sector: early childhood education policy, inclusive education policy, we have the school feeding policy. We develop those policies and we don't know how we are going to run the policies, how we are going to implement the policies, and then it comes with a whole lot of challenges. So before we develop the policies, let's do a thorough study. Let's have the data. Let's look at the resources to implement these policies, and then it will help us. Otherwise, we will develop the policies with all the beautiful content and we'll be faced with the challenges. Now, talking about the review of the senior high school policy, Prof mentioned that most countries has free tuition, but the boarding is not free. Now, looking at the challenge, one of the main challenges we have is the feeding of the students in the school. And then we owe a huge amount to the buffer stock when it comes to feeding. So if nothing at all, why don't we look at the feeding aspect alone? If parents are made or other guardians are made to pay for the feeding alone for now, as it's one of the main major challenges we have, so that we look at the others whilst we address the other challenges that comes with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before we go for this quick break, Mr. Kabono, there's been a number of reactions to some of the things that you said. Some parents who are sending us messages on social media want you to talk about the situation with feeding, access to textbooks, and the overcrowding situation in senior high schools that you are aware of. Those three things, briefly. Lex.
Well, let me say that one thing that surprised me is how can a government with capitalist orientation centralize the purchase of items to be sent to all schools across the country. That buffer stock arrangement is adding cost. And let me give you an example. If a school is around a JUSU, where maize is cheap, why can't the school just go to the market gates and buy maize, and it ought to be supplied by buffer stock? Let us do a forensic audit of the cost of items that some of these centralized bodies are giving to government to pay, and then you begin to understand why we are having the cost that we're talking about. Look, you see, the feeding situation is this, that you have to wait for somebody to mobilize food items and come and supply to you. When we have a history of schools purchasing food items from the time of St. Gordon Gorgesbeck. So all of a sudden, what we have mastered in doing by the schools having contracts with suppliers became null and void, and a central body of people who did not have a history of food supply started supplying food to the schools. And you know something? You have headmasters from one school going around trying to do barter trade, that they brought me so much rice. So if you also have so much gari, can we exchange? Because the buffer stock people cannot understand the numbers and the dynamics of the numbers within the schools. I wonder why we, today, 2023, we believe in centralized distribution of food items. When there is comparative advantage in terms of price, with location of, because when you go to the northern part, the yam will be cheaper. When you come to the south, it will be more expensive. When you get to around central Ashanti, the Jisu area, the maize will be cheaper. So the schools know how to manage these things. It is taken away from them with the intention of fighting corruption. But I cannot, it's just shifting corruption. So, please, just 1 minute. Just 1 minute. So the food situation is so that it is not consistent. It is not consistent. So it brings the situation of uncertainty. So the menu plan cannot be followed. That's the one. When it comes to the other items like books, we all know the problems where the textbooks are not yet in the schools.
They are not yet in the schools.
No, we are being promised regularly that it will come. It has not come yet.
Well, the Deputy Education Minister was quoted as saying that you teachers should actually point any of the schools that don't have textbooks.
When was it? But I was not contacted. I would have pointed out.
The books for the new syllabus.
Yes.
The new syllabus.
Yes.
But the new syllabus is for basic schools.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
The new syllabus is for basic schools.
So the secondary school
Yes,
ones
no,
are not yet?
No, not yet. So we need to get the information right, okay? You see, at the end of the day, we want to go to school with a timetable and also a calendar. And be sure that when I go on the 1st, I'm coming back after 4 months. So I can plan. Because when we have the situation we have now, we have a distortion that negatively affects education.
There was a final point about overcrowding. 30 minutes.
You see, the reason why we have overcrowding is because, one, placement is problematic. As we speak, every parent wants the child to go to about 60 senior high schools in this country. We all know the 60 senior high schools in this country. Because the 60 senior high schools provide 80% of students to the traditional universities. We are talking about the Prempers, the Achimotas, but today, the overcrowding is affecting that quality education that we admire, that we want all our children to go. When you provide facilities equitably distributed and present in the schools, then it does not matter which school your child goes, because you are going to get quality education anyway. But the situation we have, and let me also say that this is the schools, let us not say it is government that is provided facilities or history, where the missions established schools over the years, and the type of parentage who appreciated and understood the quality of education and are ready to contribute. Let us not forget that. Parents who understood education and were ready to contribute. So when you go to Presec, a whole classroom block was constructed by parents. When you go to Wesley Girls, a whole computer lab was constructed by parents. So the contribution of parents cannot be taken away from the quality delivery of education anywhere.
Mr. Kabono, thank you. Please, round of applause for him and all our stakeholders who have been contributing so far together with the panel as well. This is the TV3 National Dialogue on the Free Senior High School Policy, the prospects, the problems, and then also we're looking at the gains, what the way forward should be like. That's been the major focus of this conversation, proposing solutions to it, because as major stakeholders in this, children will be into this education sector. There's no point being silent about it, even if we keep talking and the answers or reactions keep becoming the same. We as taxpayers are the ones who are funding the implementation of government policy. So we certainly have a voice. We will be back shortly after this quick break. My panel will respond to some of the questions that you asked, and then also I'll come back to you for the last round of the stakeholders engagement in the studio. We're also live on 3FM 92.7, also live on TV3 Ghana on Facebook. I'm mindful of the messages we're getting on social media. I'll read them right after this quick break. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly.
Welcome to Class House Electronics Company Limited. We stock your favorite brands at affordable prices. From air conditioners, chandeliers, LED curved TVs, washing machines, fridges, blenders, sound systems, etc. Experience the best customer service at any of our branches nationwide or call the head office Spintex Road on 0549 503 305 and 0573 333 335.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to demonstrate to you the superior properties of Flamingo paint as compared to other paint brands on the market. We take equal quantities of Flamingo paint and this ordinary paint. We then dilute them with water. And now, let the test begin. The gentleman on the left is going to apply the ordinary paint, and the gentleman on my right will use the Flamingo superior paint. As you can clearly see, Flamingo has the obvious better hiding. Furthermore, Flamingo has painted a much larger area. You know, one bucket of Flamingo paint is equal to several buckets of any other paint brand on the market. Flamingo paint is made with superior formulation to give superior durability, superior hiding, superior coverage. Flamingo paint, simply superior.
Pepsodent is aware that globally, 1 in 2 children suffer from cavities. That's why by giving her Pepsodent, you're not only protecting her teeth, but also helping her grow up and thrive at every stage of her life with a healthy and confident smile, so she can succeed and achieve all of her dreams. Because every smile matters.
Everybody knows Acrobato. And if you know Acrobato, it means you know M-Punch Homeopathy Clinic. M-Punch Homeopathy Clinic is my pillar. Let's hear what others are saying about M-Punch Homeopathy Clinic. Who will be careful M-Punch one?
Chesena me ankasa me period no say problems wom ntina ma wo ho idea ma me papa chesena nya asem ketewa na me coin point no mo hwe me mogya mu no mo hwe bibia na so mo meduro me fire no ene ma won kra me nu foforo kwa na me kwan mu a eba head everything yourself
me ma me no adwodwo eda ho a wontumi nante ene ne ko end point o mama nu a ene ne ho eden a watimi asori anante.
That's end point for you of Acrobato. Hello hey ohwehwe what che okay a free bra wo di end point wa dance am me call you no me Johnson sema na enkoyie empaswa na ma yemre nyina na magina sabema na me be fie for there e ho na nyina jaresa. You heard everything. I have secret. M-Punch is my secret. M-Punch Homeopathy Clinic. I'm free.
The Ghana National Association of Teachers, NAT, has scaled up its commitment to ensuring improved access to treatment for teachers battling cancer. Together with the Sweden Ghana Medical Center, SGMC, NAT provides teachers and members on pension with free cancer treatment.
Effective this particular year, when you retire and unfortunately something like this thing happens to you, the center will take care of it.
And on top, the Ghana National Association of Teachers also seeks better conditions of service for members in hard-to-reach communities, as well as aiding better access to the professional development of members.
Apart from the professional courses, we are going to have programs for our members that members will be moving to Abankro to have a field and also get continual professional development from the institute.
Learn more on TV3. Make a date with NAT-R every Wednesday at 5:45 p.m. and Sundays at 1:30 p.m. NAT-R, hope for the Ghanaian teacher.
NAT-R shows Wednesdays at 5:45 p.m. and on Sundays at 1:30 p.m. on TV3.
When the sun rises, there is hope. While this hope lingers on, the citizens look up to the government, the economy, the national development agenda, and everything in between.
On Ghana Tonight, it's our utmost priority to bring you insightful conversations on the economy, break down the biggest issues while setting the agenda for transformation and national development. The big and important stories are treated from the human interest angle, while the facts and the figures are painted with precision. So now, Let's cut the convention and start the conversation here on Ghana Tonight. I am your host, Alfred Okamsi.
Ghana Tonight shows Monday to Friday at 10 p.m. on TV3.
Brought to you by
Flamingo Paint. Superior durability, superior hiding, superior coverage, simply superior.
All sporting disciplines matter on Warm Up Plus.
Warm Up Plus, the most exciting hour on TV. So join the conversation and get updated.
Get sports news, visit exciting places, and be in the know on Warm Up Plus. Let's go, Diana.
We're just getting started.
We're just getting warmed up.
Catch me, Yao Ufusulabi.
And me, Aniela Alote.
Warm Up Plus, new season coming soon on TV3.
Back to the TV3 National Dialogue, the Free Senior High School Policy in Perspective, the problems, the prospects, and also the progress. If you've been following the conversation since we started, we've been diagnosing what the real situation is on the ground, and the panel and stakeholders in studio have been talking about solutions, proposing solutions as to how to better this policy and improve on the impact, the results that it's having on our wards, children in this country in the coming years. And we have Professor Stephen Ade, Dr. Peter Patianti, Professor Peter Court is going to be joining us on Zoom. Unfortunately, couldn't join us. Dr. Duusu Sakodie is with us, and Kofi Asare also. And we have a number of stakeholders as well who have joined us in the studio to share their views and their thoughts. You've been hearing a number of them before we went for the break. Let me acknowledge some other persons as well who have joined us. We have Araba Bentum, General Manager, Catholic Schools, Ghana. She's representing the Secretary General of the Catholic Bishops Conference. Can you give us a wave? Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we went for that quick break, there were questions to all of you, in fact. Start off with you, Dr. Ante, that you say that the policy is good, but the future is bleak. Mr. Bratapia wants to understand the connection between those two positions that you espoused earlier.
Yes, so we say that the policy is as good as its sustainability. So if you say that the prospects of a policy, I mean the future outlook of a policy is bleak, it means that a time will come whereby that policy will not be able to deliver what it's supposed to deliver. Now, I made 2 points. I said that one, look at the feeding of the feeding of the free SHS. Where are they coming from? And you made that point clearly, that the basic schools. So if the children that are being used as the feeding mechanism for the policy are not giving that needed kind of education at that level, you need to build the foundation. Okay, they are not being given that kind of education that they need. They are going to feed into the free SHS. They get in there and there are challenges already with the policy that you are implementing. It means that the product of the policy will not be beneficial to the system because you are doing an investment, spending money, and then and you want to ensure that at the end of the day there is certain benefits that the country would reap from it. So if you don't look at those that are being fed, I mean at the basic level, then those that are going into the free senior high school system are not children that have a certain kind of quality. And that means that at the end of the day, whatever comes out of the free senior high school will not be something that we'll be proud of. And that is why I mean that the future prospects of the policy is bleak. Again, let me make this point, and I'm glad that you are here because you agree with me that we can take a parent to court for not taking care of the ward, right? Yeah, that is something that we can do in our system. If you are a parent and you are not taking good care of your child, you can be taken to court and the court will instruct you to take good care of your child. So why are we restricting parents from taking care of their wards in a more organized manner? And I want to say in a more organized manner, because when you say this, they will tell you that we have not prevented anybody from paying. But I cannot walk into the school and then say that I want to pay my fees. When the headmaster, if he takes that money, that headmaster will be taking on. So we need authorities to give us a well-organized structure so that parents who would want to pay would have the confidence that the monies that they are going to pay will be used for what it is. If you look at the 2017 budget, there was a mention of a voluntary fund that was supposed to be created as a result of the free senior high school. What has happened to that? Nobody talked about that again after that budget was read. So this is what we are talking about. If you are not able to clearly state that this is how we are going to fund the policy, this is how we are going to feed the policy, and that is how the products of the policy are going to contribute to the future development of the country, then that policy in its future outlook is bleak.
Okay, Professor Stephen Ade, there was a question to you as well about you talked about the issue of
The payment of the boarding fee.
The boarding fee. Yes.
The example that you gave, that those countries, they run community schools. So
That's
the concept will be a bit different from us.
What we do now.
So, and they created a boarding facility for exceptional cases, those who can afford. But in our area, our system, we envisage a boarding system.
It's the opposite.
So if you it's the opposite. So if you want them to pay for boarding fee, then the two philosophies will not have the common ground. That is what.
Professor Day.
First of all, I think that we Ghanaians must accept that the inherited boarding school system, no country in the world with a free school operates a boarding school system, period. Even America doesn't do so. What is needed is quality community secondary schools. And we must, at some point, stop, whether we are talking about STEM or other things. The issue has been the quality of community schools in Ghana has been generally poor. So people would therefore go to the boarding school. We have proven that community secondary school, properly done, will be cheaper with higher quality products. And I'm not talking theory. In my village, 8 years ago, as my social responsibility, we built a community secondary school, which serves 12 villages. For the past 5 years, they have gotten 100% WASI scholarship results with straight A's. Only 3 children out of the 5 cohorts didn't, for the first time, qualify for a tertiary education. We are having about 8 or so MasterCard holders from Hiramwasi. And what we have done, which is a win-win, is this. If the teachers we take care of, all the teachers have accommodation, have everything, have Wi-Fi, have access to water, electricity, and everything there. And then it's rather the children within 12 villages who come in the day. And when they come in the day, when they finish at 2 o'clock, we don't send them home. Because the difference between a boarding school and a day school is the evening prep time. So we feed them lunch, and then the prep time, they have it between 3 and 5, supervised prep time. The third thing we do is the fact that when they come from the villages, excuse me to say, somebody comes, they write his village name, or say, Adiemra, they mean to mean super. He can't spell his village name, and he has finished BECE, pass. How they passed, I will leave it to Kaboni to advise me. So what we do is this. We have 2 tracks. There are some who can do it in 3 years. Some require 4 years. They require 1 year just to bring them to the level, because other than that, they go through the system to fail. And as a result, we are getting the... And then comes the targeting. I'm not supporting the any... Because in everywhere else, there's no targeting when it's a free secondary school. But it's a way you can have selective targeting without saying that you are richer, pay or not. In the village, I thought that we should get the Caboose children, a few of them, to come and civilize my people. Because, so, out of the 500 students, we give a small boarding for only 100. And the 100 people, you can come from Accra or Tamale. You pay 10,000 cedis because it's a good school. We are full. And then we use it to feed everybody else, of course, with other support. So, and this is voluntary. We haven't asked you to. The team. So the villages, the 12 villages come for free if they come. But if you are a foreigner, we call them foreigners. If you are not from the 12 villages in my context, you are a foreigner. So the foreigners from Accra and Kumasi and other things come, and they pay 10,000. And we use it, we of course, at the school in Accra subsidize also. We use it to fuel them, give everybody the same lunch. Of course, they will have 3 meals. So we must, and this has been designed to fit a Ghanaian situation. It doesn't exist anywhere. And that is where we should bring the brains together, the teachers and others, and say that, look, this is our situation. Every child must be educated. How can we build a system? As for what Kabonu, for once we are agreeing on the deterioration. If Prempeh College continues to have 5,000 students in a facility meant for 1,400 or 500, within the next 5 years, there will be nothing, nothing at all. And therefore, there's a need. I am 100% supportive that no child should be left behind. But I believe that there are ways whereby we can solve the challenges that have emerged, and that no policy should be seen as a doctrine. It's something that must evolve, and we must bring our brains. And the Ghanaians are capable of solving it.
Indeed, and that's the reason why we are having this conversation this afternoon, because of the capabilities of the Ghanaian to solve these problems, propose meaningful, sustainable, and then also feasible solutions to these challenges we're faced with as a country. A number of you have sent messages. I'll read the first batch of it. Adam Abdul Basit is talking about Kofi Asare not saying what he believes is the reality about free SHS outcomes. Prince Anani Selassie says, if the foundation is destroyed, how can the whole educational system stand? And this one also here says that I can afford 1,100 CDs for my niece per semester to help the free senior high school policy. And then Kwame Sapon, you are responding to someone saying they should take them to GIS. This one here says, Benjamin Adumata, the free senior high school policy is the best, but I don't support government to fund boarding fees for students. Those in the boarding houses must pay for bread. That's for bed and breakfast. You say for bed and breakfast. Kofi Asare, good one. Those from private schools should pay fees, and those from public schools should pay because they are less privileged, you say. I'm not sure if that's the full reflection of the reality in public schools, but Adam Abdul Basit says technical education should be given a priority as well. I think the Africa Education Watch has done something on how the free senior high school has also impacted on technical education. Also, Jamal says corruption is killing us. Talk about it and stop talking about free SHS. Well, guess what? Corruption is also one that is impacting every other sector, including free SHS, right? So we'll talk about it. If we're able to deal with it, just as Kofi said, we can also have enough money to fund free senior high school in its entirety as we're doing now. It says government should look for extra funding sources to suffocate and burden us with more taxes. They should bring all the stolen money, you say. And this one here also says education brings about literacy, but does not reduce or prevent poverty. Zimbabwe literacy rate to 90%, but inflation is 200%. So, okay. This one here says, Dr. Sarkodie, you have proudly made my day. God bless you. This one here says that, okay. Okay, it says, I don't see anything wrong with government spending $3 billion on education in a year. The Auditor General reports in 2020 stated that about 52 billion revenue collected in 2019 was transferred from GCB Bank to an unknown destination. If corruption loopholes are sealed, we can keep running the free SHS without adding any taxes to the citizens. Benjamin Edumata, thank you very much for, so there's a lot going to you, Dr. Odeosu Sarkodie, as well. And so we will get into the next batch of the messages. There are tons and tons of them. Thank you very much. And this one here from Dr. Kwame Asante says, I want to find out from Angel Kabono if we can measure the quality of the education at the senior high school level with the results. Because listening to him, he questions issues about how the free senior high school has reduced the quality of education being offered in its entirety at the free, it says at the free senior high school level. So if the results are good, then what does he mean by the quality not being good? You say. Thank you. Mr. Kabono, respond to that. Then I'll come to you, Dr. Odeosu Sarkodie.
The gentleman or lady, I don't know.
The gentleman.
The gentleman is trying to push me into realms that he will wish I don't go. Because a lot of issues go into examination and examination outcomes. And it's a very complicated matter. And I'll just say something simple that 60% of yesterday may not be 60% of today. And let those who have ears, let them hear. I won't go further than that. So when it comes to issues of results, and you measure by the numbers alone, and we begin to interrogate the results. Then, for example, some time ago, it's only advanced level students who were going to the university. Now, senior high students are going to the university. Are you telling me that the senior high school level is the same as the advanced level? Mm-hmm. Let us not get there. What we are saying is that when you go to the schools and you go to the institutions, we see things deteriorate. We see that the schools have challenges. We know that parents are being burdened. Today, PTAs on their own volition are collecting monies from parents, voluntarily in quotes. Who controls it? Into whose account does the money go? The money so collected, is it used purposely for the reason for which it is collected? Juxtapose this to the days when it was under a certain control, where the PTA account was part of the school account, where the PTA chairman cannot take a CD without the co-signature of the head of school. I am saying that so many things are happening on the blind side. And we, those who are practitioners in that environment, are getting a little bit worried. Again, the issue of, have you paid a visit to some of the basic schools that produced the caliber of Professor Asari Ngo? Do you know that in the 60s, or most professors today went to public basic schools? Mm-hmm. Today, can those public basic schools produce professors? Go to Kaijano. Come to Medina, where I live, and look at the nature, the type of basic schools we have. How come Rwanda is reversed the situation where parents are now moving their children from private schools into public schools? And in our case, the reverse is happening. Because resources have been moved to a certain area. And majority, as you've indicated, is feeding. So let people not jaundice this discussion with politics. Let us look at it purely from the professional education point of view. If there is no problem, what business do we have coming here? Lastly, Prof, Is it Fidium? Yeah, sorry. I can't mention the first part.
Yes.
But these are people within a locality who have identified problems based on the realities of their locality and found solution to that problem. That is what education is supposed to be. That education is community-based. It is the people who identify their realities and prefer a solution to those realities. That is why in education, teachers cannot own it. Parents can't own it. Nobody can own education. Education is owned by the people.
Kamano, thank you very much. To you, Dr. Do Susakode, because I think Mr. Brightapia asked a question, which you noted. And then also, why would you support that proposal for government to admit the willing support that parents have openly expressed that they want to give to support the implementation of the Free Senior School program to guarantee some level of sustainability? Because some of the revenue projections and the other sources that you touched on, just as Kofi said, as economists, you say all things being equal. So you are assuming that all things being equal, this and that will get so much revenue from these areas. But then again, it's subject to unforeseen situations. But then the support from parents is a sheer source of funding. They say, we have money, we want to help the policy. Would you recommend that be looked at and at least considered?
Sure. I mean, we have a policy, and the policy has problems, and that's why we are here, to find solutions to that problem. And one of the problems, per your invitation to me, is about the financing. And if we have to look at different sources of financing and asking parents to contribute would help resolve the financing problem, then sure, I support it. And I think my friend mentioned that it should be structured. Not that, has any parent gone to school to say, I'm supporting, and say, you can't support. I think that should be the argument. We should structure it, maybe have a PTA, something fund for each school, which will support the feeding, which will support the textbook, support uniform, etc., etc. So let's structure the parents' contribution. If you are a parent and you cannot contribute, nothing should happen to you. You should not be penalized. Your child should not be punished for not contributing, but if somebody is able to contribute and is well structured, I am for it. I'm not against it. At the end of the day, we are looking for.
Yes. I think that Mr. Kabuno, it seems this is the first time we are meeting together.
Oh, okay.
We think more alike than he thought.
Yeah.
The reality is this: the average parent with a child in this public secondary school is spending not less than 2,000 a year.
2,000 cedis.
Minimum. I've been checking because I'm a villager, so I'm very interested in what happens in public schools more than private schools. Huh. They pay about 400 cedis minimum a term for classes. That is straight away 1,200
for the year.
None of them will spend less, despite all the books they are spending about 800 minimum on that. That's already 2,000. Most of them, when they are going, there's one living near me going, the chore box for survivor, there are some, of course, like my ladies who can go every week. But if you went to school where I went, we also, we never came for midterm. We never, you go once and you come. And so, but then when they are going, at least 500 minimum is there. So the reality is this. The public school, let's be very clear, it should be fee-free. Tuition free. Yeah. Teachers are being paid by the government, so it is free. Let the government continue to expand the infrastructure. And then let us have a system which allows some contribution by the parents in a systematic way, but the one who cannot pay gets a scholarship. Yeah. That is what it was, and I believe, and when it comes to the boarding school, when I'm suggesting the day schools, we won't close Achimota, we won't close Mfansipim. But I suggested as way back at the Champions Day when I was a student in Australia, PA, it was kind of Riyad Marajan was then the ambassador. And I says that government scholarship also should be such that the politicians and me and you don't get it and the villagers don't get it. Let's give scholarship to the boarding schools for the first girl in every Saito school in Ghana. And the first boy, we don't say the first and second. First boy, first girl. All over the country will be given a scholarship to go to the selected boarding schools, which will be the scholarship. So we have equity. So there are various ways of achieving the government's objective, which is excellent, access, equity, and what was the third one?
Quality.
And quality. And at this moment, we are not achieving all of them. And that eventually will lead, if we don't do something to find the money or other things, will lead to a collapse of the system.
Alfred, I was trying to end on any review should be cost saving. Because if you don't take care, we may end up reviewing it and implementing something else which is going to impose more costs on us than the previous one.
But is the cost the biggest problem? Because from what I understand, from Angel and the woman,
talk about the
indeed. So because if the concern is about the review being the objective of the review being cost saving, I really don't think that that's been the proposal.
Of course, it cannot be the only objective.
Yes, indeed. That if we're looking at review in other areas, it's more of, from what we have heard today, the burden of the cost not being carried by government alone, which then impacts on other variables as well, including quality and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So I share the same concern. And on my last point, that we have to be careful about the review, as I've said. And then every decision, the recommendations that we make should be based on data. It should be scientific. I was happy about how the government managed the COVID-19 with restrictions and all that. And anytime the president spoke, he said, based on data, based on the science. So maybe my background is influencing me, Prof, your teaching. I'm from academic background, and I'm calling for a review. Our sister talked about a thorough review. Let's do the research, both desktop research, qualitative, quantitative, on-field, wherever research that we do. Kofi is here, all of us can be involved. Let's do the research, comprehensive research across the country, identify the problems.
Point of order.
And then
we cannot say go and do research. The government, it's important that the government at this time have a review commission, committee, and they will do it and come the reality and go to the Nagrat, the NAD, the parents, the students, and
Education
then come
Watch
out
and
because as for the free SHS, it must succeed. How do we do it succeed? That is, it's as simple as that.
That's the exact problem. That's the exact. In fact, that's the exact answer.
We have the same
we're all
point
putting up now.
That we should do the review, the research, funded by government, of course. But I'm saying Kofi. I didn't say Kofi should fund it. I said Kofi is here.
Should be
I
involved.
am here.
Okay.
So we should be involved.
Actually, we don't need money. It doesn't cost much
to do that.
It
So
will
let's
not
do
cost
that.
anything.
So my
Maybe
main point is
I
that
can find
it should be informed by data.
Right.
Let's do the research, because sometimes if you listen to one person, out of emotions or out of something, you might think that, hey, the problem is so huge. But if you do the research, you might think that the problem may not be that big, and that there are solutions, scientific solutions to the problem. And that's what I recommend.
Fantastic.
And my last point on revenue.
In 30 seconds.
I'm saying that Ghana has a potential to raise enough revenue. We are a resource-rich country. #1 producer of gold in Africa. 5.4 billion oil, 6.6 billion gold. We must leverage the natural resource to finance some of these expenditures.
Okay. Madam Bentuma, I'll come to you because do you have the microphone? Please do that in a minute for me. Yes. Yes, 1 minute. Yes, 1 minute.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I I will look at issues from the fundamentals. The FQ, which is the free, was given to Ghana from the UN perspective. It's not Ghana that picked it up. The UN directed that every country should have free universal compulsory education for people below 18 years, which means that these people are not supposed to pay anything concerning education. So let's say 18 and below or 17 and below are not in the payment bracket. Therefore, who benefits from the free? It's certainly the parents or the guardian, because they are the people above 18 who must pay for this under 17s. So the target the IMF is talking about is towards those people, not their children.
Thank you. Madam Mentum, with the Catholic schools, yes, please.
Yes. Hello, my name is Araba Bintum, the General Manager for Catholic Schools Ghana. As much as we are talking about the funding of the free SHS, I will also want us to look at the disciplinary aspect of the whole program.
Okay.
Because the schools are free and the parents just dump their children there, free things are always expensive. The disciplinary aspects of the schools are not being looked at. Because I remember I went to Opokuwari to visit the school. And when I went to this, in fact, I was frightened with the thousands and thousands of children in the school under one headmaster. And most of the schools do not have teachers staying on the school compound. So after school, you see about 2 or 3 teachers staying on the compound. The rest leave and they go to their various homes. Children have become, in quotes, arrogant, and the kind of behavior they put up. Now the teachers are afraid of the children. And when you go to certain schools, headmasters and teachers have bracketed their doors, and when they close from school, they sit in the house and they are even afraid to come out.
Right.
So let's look at, apart from the funding, let's also look at the disciplinary aspect of the whole free SHS. Thank you.
Thank you.
Because if the children acquire the education without discipline, they cannot do anything.
Perfect. I agree with you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think Professor Sinade touched on that briefly, the moral aspect of the free senior high school policy that also borders on discipline. Kofi, before we round up finally.
There are 2 quick things I want to point out, perhaps of further research and interrogation. The first is that I touted the free senior high school success mainly based on increasing transition from junior high school to senior high school from 66% in 2016 to 92% by 2022. While that is remarkable, let's avert our minds to the transition between primary and junior high school. In the 75 deprived districts of this country, only 82% of students are crossing from primary 6 to junior high school 1, simply because 25% of primary schools do not have junior high schools. Majority of them are in the north. In the traditional northern region, 60% of primary schools do not have junior high schools. So we've gotten to the point where free senior high school is actually generating so much good results to the extent that more and more students are leaving BEC to senior high school than from primary 6 to junior high school 1. Not forgetting that basic education, rather, is the fundamental right. And so we must take a look at transition. As I say so, I go beyond free senior high school. We are discussing reviewing free senior high school. It is not just about reviewing the cost mechanisms, the implementation arrangement and all that, but also reviewing transition post-secondary. What are we seeing? Data that we have at EduWatch from the Ghana Tertiary Education Commission suggests that in the year the first batch of free senior high school graduates entered university in 2021, compared to the previous year, which is the last batch of the non-free senior high school students, entry to tertiary. Data we have is that excluding the nursing training colleges, okay, because that data is not complete yet, excluding the NTCs for both years, but including all tertiary institutions, including the specialized ones, the College of Education, private, public universities, technical universities, all of them, 40% of the first batch of the free senior high school students were able to access tertiary education. They were able to honor their admission to tertiary education. But in the year before, for the last non-free senior high school batch, it was 46% that transited. We must ask ourselves what the issue is, especially when in 2020, we for the first time recorded 50% of students getting A1 to C6 in all the 4 core at WASI. And government published it in the dailies. We all saw it. That for the first time in our history, we have 50% of students getting A1 to C6 in the 4 core, which meant that result was one of the best. So why is it that in a year that we had that significant feat, in January 2021, when tertiary institutions admitted, we had only 40% of senior high school graduates, that's the first batch of the free senior high school, going to tertiary, when the previous year recorded 46%. We must find out whether the people who are so poor, or some of the people who are so poor that they cannot afford secondary education, are struggling to enter tertiary because perhaps they cannot afford, or it is perhaps a quality issue. So that's a discussion that I think we must further. Thank you very much.
Thank you. 1 minute.
All right, so I think the message is simple. Don't put all the burden on yourself as a government. We know that you want to assist the system, but as it stands now, there should be avenues whereby when you are in difficult situation, you can fall on that kind of avenue to assist the system. And that is what we are saying, that the 100% that is coming from government, we should have a second look at it, so that there can be 40% coming from somewhere. And I keep maintaining that I personally do not care where the 40% would be coming from. It could be from parents, it could be from reducing corruption and all those things. But so far as we have an additional source of income coming to support government, so that 40% that is being relieved from government can go back to the basic school to help put the system in its right perspective. I think that is simply the message that I have.
Dr. Peter-Anti, thank you very much. Madam, in a minute, please.
I think I have just 1 minute to say something. As a parent rep on this dialogue, I've been hearing about them saying 70% of whatever is the budget on free SHS is on feeding. How are they being fed? What quality of food is being given? That is a problem for a lot of parents, because we are spending so much on provisions and food sent to our children in the school, even though the children are being fed. So I think that aspect should be looked into, and then government should give clear direction. If they need help, they should make it clear we need help. I think we are dancing around the problem, and then when parents try to support, then it's as if we don't need your help. And then it's becoming a problem. So sometimes when you approach parents that they should help, they tell you that government has not said that he needs help. So it's becoming a dilly-dally, we're running around. So let's government give clear direction. I think I need help. Parents, give me help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, appreciate you. And please, let's put our hands together for ourselves and for our panel members, the stakeholders in here as well. Thank you very much for making the time to be here. Really, really appreciate you also taking the time and also contributing to this all-important conversation. And to you, our panel members, Professor Stephen Adey, Dr. Peter Peter-Anti, Dr. Edo Susakodie, and Kofi Osare, thank you very much for coming. And to you, our audience, many of you sending the messages. I apologize we couldn't read all of them. But guess what? This conversation is a progressive one. And it continues even beyond today, because we're going to keep knocking on the doors of policymakers, because we as taxpayers are the ones who are financing the execution and implementation of these policies by government. And we have a voice, and we have major stakeholders as well. Thank you very much for joining us. We were also live on 3FM 92.7 and TV3 Ghana on Facebook, DSTV channel 279, all across the world on 3news.com. On behalf of the news team here at Media General, the leadership, Michael Otieje and Matilda Mam, thank you very much for making the time. I am Alfred Okanse. Have a good afternoon.
This program is rated PG. It contains scenes of brief nudity, mild violence, and strong language. Parental guidance is advised.
Wake up.
Good morning.
Good morning.